Hello, everyone. I'm David Corey with the Emotional Intelligence Training Company, and I'm here with my colleague, Mr. Kim Cairns from the far west coast of Canada. And we're here to talk about optimism. And for those of you who don't know us or our background, I just want to let you know that we've been doing this work for a long time. So I know we started about 20 years ago, and we've been designing and delivering leadership courses based on the concept of emotional intelligence all over the world since that time. And so, we've had the opportunity to talk with executives and managers at all levels, employees at all levels of companies about optimism and what a difference optimism can make in their work and in their lives and in their communication and in their relationships. And we just want to share a little bit about of that with you through a conversation about optimism. And so we're going to invite you to sit back and relax and join in if you like. If you're on Google Plus and you want to join us, by all means, do so. And we will just have a discussion about this incredible concept of optimism, which is really quite fascinating from a number of different perspectives. And so, Kim, we were just chatting before we went to air and talking about optimism. And I think you had a really great point that you wanted to get across about optimism in relation to what we often think about optimism is that it's looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. And we kind of think that optimists are kind of these, fakey kind of Pollyanna type individuals. And we strive more for realism than optimism. And I thought you had a really great point around that. If you wouldn't mind sharing that with us as we start off our conversation.
Yeah, Dave. I think that optimism has got a bad rap, actually, in our culture over the years, because it is that notion that there's a lack of reality testing with people that are viewed as being optimistic. And I guess, from my perspective, there's a real link between those two competencies. That real bedrock optimism comes from actually experiencing challenges and adversity in life and stumbling around in that process. It's not a pleasant time when we're working through really big challenges in our life. But I think that what ends up developing is an awareness and a knowledge that as I struggle through that, I'm adding to my tool belt. I'm accumulating more skill sets and capacity. And that all of those new learnings and skills are actually going to be applicable in future situations that I don't even know about yet. So there's at some point in our lives, we come to that place. And so it allows us, I think, to even just view that struggle as being okay. It's a part of life. And what learnings can I take from this? And knowing that when I'm faced with a new challenge, that I've been through other challenging situations in my life. So there's that link back to, oh my God, this is the worst day of my life. A quick reality test is the worst day of your life, Kim. It's managing that self-talk in the moment too, and being able to say, well, no, this isn't actually the worst day in my life. The worst day in my life was back here, and I actually made it through that day and came out of it knowing more than I knew prior to that day. So it was a value in my life. So I think it's about attaching value to dealing with difficulties and challenges in life too.
And also what you're suggesting, Kim, is this whole idea that we have choice over the way that we think about things. And I think that that's a tough concept to wrap one's mind around when you've had nothing but, really dark, unpleasant, from all perspectives, negative experiences in your life. To realize that we actually have a choice about how we think about things. That's a tough kind of idea to consider, that we have a choice, and yet what we hear just this morning on the radio, they were talking to survivors of hostage situations,
Mm.
and you know, we think about what would that be like, being in that situation? How would we choose to think about that situation? And wow, that's it would be really difficult to see what's good about being in that situation.
Mhm.
And knowing that, or hearing these people, hearing their stories afterward, thinking, wow, their ability to kind of hang on to hope, which you know, there's an interesting connection between optimism and hope that kept them going. And keeps all of us going when the going gets tough, and when things look dark, and when things look dismal, and you know, when life serves up as it does, some of those really difficult kinds of situations to that stand in the way of our goals of happiness and well-being, that it's pretty tough to remain positive. How do we remain positive? I mean, we also talked about this during, just before we went to air, and that is how did you and I end up being fairly positive individuals? I mean, that is who we are. We are optimistic. We do believe in more of a solution-oriented focus, that we will get around obstacles. We will meet challenges, etc. How do we get to be those kind of people? I mean, I realize I dropped a whole bunch of ideas here, Kim. Pick up any one you wish in order to continue to have
Yeah.
dialogue about this concept.
Well, I think you know, what springs to my mind, Dave, is this whole you know, nature nurture kind of perspective on things. And I think that you know, I grew up in a family and in a community where, as a younger person, I saw that some unpleasant and bad stuff happened in life. And you know, I was fortunate enough to have people modeling some pretty solution-focused ways of dealing with that, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. And so I observed that before I was maybe old enough to really understand what was going on. But yes, difficult things happen in life. And it is about the choices that those mentors made. And so there was learning there. And that combined with difficulties faced as a young person, you know, schoolyard difficulties, friendship difficulties, and learning how to work through those, and being hopeful that there will be a positive outcome. Having that being the driving force. I want the best possible outcome here. How do I go about contributing to that? And when I see people that are pessimistic, often there's an externalization of everything. Bad stuff always happens to me. The self-talk that comes out of those people is diminishing. So your notion about hope is, it's not blind, but it's hope fuels that energy to take that next step or half step forward, no matter how much drudgery there seems to be involved in that process. It fuels that next step. And there's that realization that actually I do have a lot of strengths and abilities. I can actually work through this situation. And if I can't, then I can seek some outside guidance too about how other people have gone through these kind of processes. So that notion of, again, it's not just me individually working through it, that there's a notion of community when I run into difficulties too. And it's being able to ask for help, ask for guidance, ask for perspective.
And we human beings are incredibly resilient. We're a resilient species, and if you think about that, there has to be some sort of genetically, you know, programmed way of us seeing things in an optimistic way? Why would we even try things if there was the kind of the overwhelming belief that we're not going to be successful? And it is about tapping into that kind of hardwiring, for lack of a better word, that we have for optimism, that we are going to be successful. We're going to do this, and it's going to work out. Now, I think while we all have that, that tape playing, you know, I'm going to do this and it's going to work out. We all have it at different levels, depending again on our prior life experience. If we keep getting shut down, we might lower our sights and lower our expectations in terms of what we can accomplish and what we can do. So I think we probably all have a set point for optimism. And then again, you brought in earlier this idea about it balancing with other EQ competencies like reality testing. So there has to be this balance between optimism on the one hand and reality testing on the other, because we don't want blind optimism. We've seen that, and we've seen the kind of trouble that can possibly get us into. And I tend to struggle with that on occasion. I have wonderfully optimistic plans, and unless we take into consideration, what the possible implications are, and actually test that reality by reaching out, as you suggest, Kim, and discussing that with other people, then we can get into some jams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you were talking to a number of leaders over the years, and one of the interesting situations we run into are, leaders that feel that they need to come up with the answer all the time, that it's up to them to be the big guide out front, and there's a lot of pressure involved in that kind of viewpoint, that kind of approach to life, and it's interesting working with people that make a bit of a shift to, let's include others in resolving those issues, in solving those problems. And that can actually fuel optimism in itself. So it's engaging other people in the process, not feeling like I'm alone in this journey. So, I mean, I think culturally we have things like support groups that spring up around any number of issues. And what those support groups end up doing, I think, is working on people's optimism, that it does not have to stay like this. We do not have to remain in this place. There is possibility for movement, even when it seems like there is not that possibility. What can we co-explore to take us in a direction that's going to get us out of this dilemma?
And it's a critical, optimism is a critical piece of leadership. In order to inspire others, to be enthusiastic about a project, and we know how contagious enthusiasm and optimism is, and so the question that we often ask managers is what do you want people to catch from you in terms of their emotional state? Well, we want people to be optimistic. We want people to focus on what's great about a project, and why it's going to be wonderful working on the project together, and collaboratively working to solution. And so, that the situation that you described, Kim, is really characteristic of traditional leadership, where we don't necessarily go to the team or to the group, but we feel like we somehow have to come up with it on our own. That's the hierarchy. So if I'm up here, then everybody below me is depending on me to come up with the wonderful solution for everyone, and also to be optimistic and enthusiastic for everyone. Well, I don't know about you, Kim, but I don't necessarily feel like every day I have the same amount of enthusiasm and optimism towards my work, and I really rely on the optimism and enthusiasm of others. And it's the wonderful thing about working in a team. And as you know, I used to be on my own, and it was really difficult to generate that energy every day in the absence of other colleagues. And now we have this wonderful team, and when one of us is not so enthusiastic, others are, and we're able to do that for each other, and to keep each other going when it gets difficult and tough and stressful. And wow, optimism is just one of those things that is really attractive in other individuals. I often think that if I were to run a dating service, I would teach everyone how to be optimistic, because optimism is really an attractive quality in another human being. And I think you would do a great business by helping people to be optimistic, and looking at what's great about life and in general, as an attractant to the people that you want to attract into your life.
Well, and Dave, when you mention, optimism and life, for me, I'm, again, taking a look at it from the EQI model perspective, I find that my optimism increases the more I become aware of all of those 15 competencies at operation in my emotional operating system. So, it's that capacity, I think, to recognize that when things are going off kilter, when things are not going well, what one of those 15 muscles is not working well? And so there's optimism just within that. It's like knowing that when things are not flowing in the way that I'd like them to be flowing, to be able to look internally and say, well, I really haven't exercised that reality testing muscle much lately. I definitely haven't been exercising that assertiveness muscle. And so there's immediately a flame of optimism that I can go to work on what that causal factor is in the off-kilter feeling. So there's little ways that we can keep fanning real optimism. Again, not the school of silly hope. It's definitely not you or I walking around with a silly smile on our face hoping things are going to get better. It really is built on, okay, given this situation, given how I feel about it, what are my choices? I know I am making choices within this. The choices that I'm presently making don't seem to be leading me out of this. Yes. So what are some other lenses I can be looking through?
Yes. Even the concept of emotional intelligence is in itself an optimistic concept. The idea that we can improve the learned part of emotional intelligence, that we don't have to simply remain at the level of our hard wiring, that there is a nature and nurture component to emotional intelligence, and that we have these wonderful skills, these 15 competencies that we can improve in. And that's optimistic. There's a lot of hope for people who struggle with these competencies to improve and become more effective, and more effective with themselves, and know and understand themselves better, and then know and understand others for greater relationships and better communication, and just a more efficient way of living and working. And that in and of itself is optimistic. And I think, that's part of what you and I love about the work we do, is that we get to sort of witness and be a part of the growth and development of others, and see them accessing these tools which are going to just improve one's work and one's life. And that to me is incredibly optimistic, and keeps me going and keeps me excited about the work that we do. And again, as long as we're balancing that with other competencies like reality testing, and realizing and knowing that it's about putting the tools into practice. That faith and optimism have an interesting connection with each other, but if the faith is that I'm going to just have faith that things are going to work out, and I'm not going to do anything about my situation or circumstances, then that's kind of a blind faith, and that is really probably not going to work well for an individual who simply has faith, air quotes, that things are going to work out, or that someone else is going to take care of things. And this is, you know, I believe that that faith is not in and of itself is not a bad thing. That you know, if we have faith that things are going to work out, as long as I do everything I can within my power to actually use the tools available to me, use the relationships with people that I have around me, etc. But as soon as we stop doing things and have the expectation that other things are just going to fall into place, that's what gives optimism a bad name. I think right there, Kim, is that idea that I'm just going to be optimistic and things are going to work out.
Right. Right. Yes, exactly. That, you know, it's, and you've mentioned this earlier, but it ebbs and flows. I think that often when we're talking with people about the model, about our emotional operating systems, initially with a lot of people, it's like, okay, so how do I get to be a master of this? And, you know, I want to be scoring high. I want to be at the top of the class with regard to each one of these competencies. And I think that the important learning comes from realizing that all of that will ebb and flow. There is no absolute mastery. There's no end point to this. We are all working on this at every stage of our lives, and it's an ongoing process. And I think the mastery comes from that perspective of continuing to work on it, continuing to be curious about how I'm operating and how well is that working for me, and how well is that working for those around me. And so I think it's about being optimistic about the fact that I have choice. I have control over that, and that's actually the only thing I have control over. So there's a relaxation that comes from, oh yeah, okay, I don't have to worry and assume about what others are going to do or what's going to happen to me next. Lots of things are going to be coming at me through life, and it's how I manage it that is going to lead me in good directions and be of benefit to those around me too.
Yes, and you know, I thought you were going to go with the old saw, where, you know, we're all fellow travelers on this journey, and it's absolutely true that, you know, we sometimes expect that because you know, because someone is a manager, that they're better at this, you know, all being human than the people that report to them. And if we can all just realize we're all fellow travelers on the road, as the old saying, and I believe there's also a song. I can't remember who sang that song, but it's about this acknowledgement, and you've said it before, Kim. This idea that we're that we should be fully formed and fully functioning is a false notion, and just the recognition and acknowledgement that that, you know what, we are where we are on our journey together, and we can improve our effectiveness, and there are ways to do that, and we're going to support and help each other along the journey. And just because we have a title doesn't mean anything in terms of where we are with respect to these skills and competencies. So, you know, we need each other, and we are social beings, and it is about being effective at forming those relationships and communicating with others, and saying, you know what, today I'm just not very optimistic. I don't know what happened to my optimism, but it kind of went out the window today based on what's happened or what's gone on, and I'm going to need some of yours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's about putting that out there, being honest and authentic. I think that, again, where optimism takes a bit of a bad turn for people is it doesn't seem authentic if somebody's just up there leading the cheerleading squad all the time. So it's about, what's my intention here? I want people to feel optimistic about this, but pay attention to what the impact of that is too. Pay attention to the impact of your behavior. And if you're being viewed just as a cheerleader, Your impact is going to be diminished in that process, because people will just start to take on an era of skepticism. It's like, oh yeah, here we go again. We're faced with a real crisis, and Johnny Rose-Colored's going at it again. So, you know, you want to be really aware of, how am I operating? How am I coming across? And it's that constant self-awareness about that too.
You mentioned being authentic, Kim, and you know, we talk about this concept of authenticity a lot, and it again is important that we are authentic and that we don't have a false optimism. And you know, you remind me of a much loved politician who unfortunately passed away, Jack Layton, and you know, he's got this famous quote which is really all about optimism. He said, "My friends, love is better than anger. Hope is better than fear. Optimism is better than despair. So let us be loving, hopeful, and optimistic, and we'll change the world." And he really believed that, and he lived it in all of his actions. He had an incredible level of authenticity and integrity that was extremely attractive. And we were drawn to him and his message. So, you know, it is about being authentic, though. You have to believe it. And if you don't believe it, you know, that's okay. Then it will be important to understand more about why you don't believe in an optimistic viewpoint about the world. And it's important to gauge when we're drifting towards that state where you just can't find optimism, and that's hopelessness. And hopelessness is indeed a terrible place to be. And of course, the people are unfortunately in that situation throughout the world. And for those people, you know, what we want for them is to find the ability to see that they do have some choices over how they view their situation and the world. And the other person that comes to mind with respect to optimism is Viktor Frankl, who wrote about this choice in a concentration camp. Well, at least he tried to write it. It was mostly in his head, and when he was released, then he wrote it. But Man's Search for Meaning is about this idea that we can actually find hope in a situation which is otherwise hopeless. And you know, it seems to be a bit of a bottom line here is that what we need is to be able to find that in ourselves or through others when things look bleak. So coming up to the end of our discussion, Kim, what final words would you like to leave our viewers with?
Well, I think you know, you've mentioned Viktor Frankl, and I hand out that book more often than any other book to people in terms of just getting a better understanding of, you are in charge of your journey, you are in charge of your choices, and actually the choices are limitless, really. Again, one takes that kind of perspective, optimism will start to flow. Again, just keep it in mind, if you haven't read Man's Search for Meaning, I'd recommend picking it up. It's not a long book, and it has powerful impact on I would say 90% of the people that read it. So, and thanks for joining us for these calls. Again, you can reach us at david@eitrainingcompany.com or kim@eitrainingcompany.com. We would love to hear your stories about your EI journey. This will actually not be the last in this series of broadcasts. Dave, let's tell people about our final chapter.
Yes, Kim. You know, we had originally thought that this was going to be a 15-part series, that this would be the 15th of a 15-part series, and that we would cover the 15 EQ competencies that are measured by the online standardized assessment, the Emotional Quotient Inventory, which is published by Multi Health Systems out of Toronto. However, Kim had the brilliant idea of having a 16th episode, which will be on well-being. So join us in 2 weeks when we will discuss the concept of well-being, which is one of the important outcomes of being effective in all 15 of our EQ competencies. And so we'll discuss that at that time. And thank you so much for joining us. And I did just want to highlight one important idea you mentioned, Kim, and that was being in charge. Being in charge of your own journey. And this is our notion of leadership, that ultimately you must lead yourself first and foremost, and you are in charge of your own life. And so ask yourself, what would a leader do? And we wish you well, and look forward to seeing you again. And please feel free to join us in a couple weeks' time when we talk about well-being. Thanks, everyone, and bye for now.